Anti-fascist demonstrators gathered in Rome on Saturday to protest a rise in neo-fascist sentiments across Italy. Politicians, including Prime Minister Paolo Gentiloni, joined the march to call for a stop to racism and fascism in the country. In Milan, also hundreds of anti-fascist demonstrators took to the streets ahead of planned rallies by neo-fascist and anti-immigrant groups. Italy's intelligence services have recently published an annual report that notes the growing appeal of radical right groups, especially among young people. For the coming election in March, former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi's right-wing coalition is set to be ahead in the polls.
The fascists will not take power in Italy, of course. However, the return of the fascists indicates that the political center is weakening, and the radical alternatives can to some extent fill their place. So what is therefore at stake in Italy is the political legitimacy of the political leadership and its institutions, its liberal traditions, as this is seen by many to be incapable of resolving the current political and economic challenges.
The demonstrations come amid fears of a revival of far-right groups in election after several European countries have tilted to the right in recent years.
The rise of right-wing populist movements is occurring across Europe, but the fascists still remain a very small minority among them. However, the mass migration to Europe is definitely fueling xenophobic tendencies, as the migration is occurring at a rate that makes it impossible to integrate or assimilate the newcomers. So the challenge in demographics is also undermining the national identity, at least it's being perceived to do so by many. And I guess what we're seeing is that Europe has a problem with its borders and its national identity. And we often find that when the liberals insist that only fascists defend borders, then that's who the public will actually vote for, as the liberals refuse to do this job.
As the election approaches, politically inspired violence has become a daily occurrence. This month, a far-right gunman wounded 6 African migrants in Macerata, a city in central Italy. Though Italy has fewer migrants than many other Western European countries, conservative lawmakers have been blaming immigrants for destabilizing Italy's already weak economy. That is while corruption, cronyism, and decades of misuse of public funds have caused Italy's national debt to rise to 131% of the GDP. The re-emergence of extremist violence, harassment, and xenophobia has gripped Italy and forced the country to face the hard right and fascist ideologies fueled by a financial crisis and migration.
Italy is currently experiencing a crisis with its post-war liberal identity. Both in terms of its political liberalism and economic liberalism. So the national identity, I would argue, is very much in crisis, and also the next major banking crisis in the EU will also most likely take center stage in Italy. So I would expect that this economic and political crisis in Italy to likely emerge in terms of how voters respond, and this will probably benefit the fascist minority they do have in the country, however small it might be.
Berlusconi's current allies promote Italian nationalism, seeking to defend against what they call the Islamization of Italy and banning migration from underdeveloped countries. Like the fascism of the past, the current far-right movements put the Italians first, banishing everything or everyone seen as foreign. Such policies in today's global scenario is worrisome, and no one knows what the outcome could be.